Okay, so now we're continuing with steps 3 through 6 in project 6-5. What we're working on here is the mailing stats worksheet. And what we're trying to look at is 3 departments in particular: landscape design, lawn and maintenance, patio and furniture. And we're wondering, how did those mailers do? When they sent out their mailers to the different cities, what was the return rate like? Did they get a good response? And so we're going to just look at that data a little bit more closely. And just to review on the mailings worksheet, it lists the mailings by city and department. Here's the cities where all the mailers were sent out to. Here's the departments that sent out the mailers. Here's the number mailed, and here's the responses returned. And as you can see, response rates usually aren't fantastic. 1690 were sent out here and only 210 were returned. So we're going to look a little more closely and see which department did the best. The other part of our component is that we're only looking at these 3 departments. So we need to have those 3 departments filtered out of all the other departments. So we're going to do that using this criteria worksheet. And what you're going to do is type in at least 3 unique characters to your to establish what Excel should look for. So the first department was landscape design, and instead of typing out the full landscape space design name of the department, we're going to just do the 3 first characters followed by an asterisk. And the asterisk acts like a wildcard or a substitute for all the characters that come after LAN. Okay, so we're going to put that as our first department here, and that's going to go in cell B2. The second department was lawn and maintenance. And so we're just going to type in LAW asterisk to designate the lawn and maintenance department. And the third department was patio and furniture, and so we're going to type in PAT asterisk to designate the patio and furniture department. Going back on mailing stats then, we're going to use what's called the dsum function. And what that's going to do is go to the database or the table that we designated as responses. That was in step number 2. And it's going to look at our criteria, LAN, LAW, or PAT, depending on what department we're focusing on, and add up how many responses were sent out from that department. So remember that the database is called responses. So you can either type the whole thing in, or once you start typing it in, you'll see that in this little helper field below that it's listed there. So you can just double click on it to enter it in, then hit comma. And then the field, remember, was the 3rd column in that responses table. That's where we found the number of mailers sent out. So we're going to type in 3 for the 3rd column. And again, the criteria was found on the criteria worksheet. And we're going to highlight cells B1 and B2 on the criteria worksheet, and then do a shift right parentheses to close that up. Okay, and so there's our number right there. Now, we don't need to recreate that entire formula because it's going to be essentially the same for total responses. The only thing that's going to be different is that the response column was column 4. So the number mailed is column 3. The number of responses is number 4, or column 4. So we're going to copy that formula from here, the number sent, to here to C7. And the only thing we're going to need to change is the 3 to a 4. But before we copy it over, we want this criteria range to stay exactly the same. Because if we don't give it an absolute value, it will update it and change that those cells to C1 and C2. So I'm going to click in here and do a function F4 and make those absolute. And then I'm going to go ahead and clicking in cell B7, do a Control C and then a Control V. Okay. Now all we need to do is update that column 3 to a 4. And now it's calculated the total responses received for the landscape and design department. And just to show you really quickly for lawn and maintenance, it's essentially the same formula. except you're going to highlight a different criteria area. So let's input responses there, comma, again it's field 3 or column 3 from the mailings worksheet table. Clicking on the criteria worksheet, this time we're going to highlight B4 and B5 as our criteria. All right, so again we can copy that over to the total responses cell, but before we do, we're going to make this absolute. So that one absolute and this one absolute. And then we're going to hit that and do a Control C and Control V. And then we're going to change that field from a 3 to a 4. Okay, and you can go ahead and follow the same step for patio and furniture. Now let's go ahead and move on to our response rate formula. And we're going to get to use that brand new function to Excel 2016 called the IFS, or the IFS function, which basically helps you avoid a lot of nested ifs. If you don't have ifs or IFS built into Excel, I do have helps in my notes about how to make the nested if function to find the same response rates determinations. And if you will probably get marked down for it in SimNet, and you can just post a note in iLearn and I can restore that point if you were needed to do the nested if because you didn't have the IFS function. So let's get started. We're going to do an equals IFS left parentheses. Our first logical test is going to be, we're going to check first the range. Let me step back. So the logical test is going to be finding that percentage rate here. And that ranks from as high as 20% and above to a response rate that's below 10%. And the way you determine the response rate is you take the total responses number and you divide it by the total sent. So we're going to do C7 divided by B7. And if that is greater than or equal to 20%, and you can just type in 20% like that, then the response rate is going to be excellent. So I'm going to click on cell C15, comma. Now, going down the line, if C7 divided by B7 is greater than or equal to 15%, so that's the next cutoff range, 15% and above, then that response rate is very good. So we're going to click in cell C16, comma. Now, the next cutoff is 10% and above. So let me backspace here. So if C7 divided by B7 is greater than or equal to 10%, comma, then that response rate is only good. So we'll click on cell C17, comma. And finally, if C7 divided by B7 is only less than 10%, that's our final cutoff, then that response rate is only average. Shift right, parentheses, and there's our formula. Let's go ahead and hit enter. Now, before we copy that formula down the line, you need to make sure to make those ranking cells where it says excellent, very good, good, and average absolute, because we don't want those to change as we copy that formula down the range. So again, using my function F4, I'll make C15 absolute, C16 absolute, C17 absolute, C18 absolute. Whoops, I accidentally hit function F3. Let's do it again, function F4, C18 is absolute. Hit enter. Okay, so now that formula is ready to be copied down, and as soon as I do, instead of C7 divided by B7, it'll say C8 divided by B8. So let's copy that down. Let's grab the fill handler, pull it down, and checking that formula. Okay, it updated everything just exactly as we wanted, and you'll see that the landscape design department did very well and got a 20% or above response rate, so their determination is excellent. While the lawn and maintenance department didn't do quite as well, They've only got a 10% to 14% response rate in their mailers, and so they got the rating of good. So now you can go ahead and finish the rest of these cells following the format that we have done in these two first rows.